Many of these rapid tests are used for schools or tracing symptomatic spread. And for everyone else, those looking to visit a vulnerable family member or looking for some peace of mind, it's a lot harder to come by. It's not hard to tell time here because every morning when the clock strikes 8, these phones don't stop. No, this is not a hotline or a radio giveaway.
Pulaski Urgent Care.
This is a doctor's office.
115 people came through that one day. I'd never seen anything like it.
They have something rare in central New York right now. COVID-19 rapid tests. With only 50 spots a day.
Pulaski Urgent Care.
By 8:30 every morning.
Fortunately, we're not having any more appointments for today.
They're booked.
We try to accommodate all of the testing that we can possibly do in addition to running a very busy 4-bed urgent care.
I tried getting a spot one morning, calling 119 times, but no luck.
What's the trick? Is there a trick to this?
Persistence. So call right at 8 o'clock. If you go to the answer machine, don't leave a message.
Physician assistant Rodney Richmond, who runs Pulaski Urgent Care, says people have traveled from Buffalo and Long Island to get a test.
They just can't seem to find rapid testing that's available to them anywhere.
We searched and searched for rapid tests being offered to the public in central New York. And we came up with 4 urgent cares that offer these 15-minute tests. An urgent care in Utica, 2 well-now urgent cares, one in Oswego and Oneonta, and of course, Pulaski Medical Urgent Care. But just how rapid are these tests? I went to the urgent care in Utica. You don't need an appointment, but you do need to wait. I got in line at 1:30. By the time I got my test and waited in the car for my results, it was 4:45.
There has to be a process by which patients can simply drive up, perhaps drive through, have the test processed, and drive right back out with a result.
A regular COVID-19 test can take 24 hours to several days for results. So why are there not more of these rapid tests? Richmond says it could be because of the cost. As patients are placing bets on if they will get an appointment, clinics are betting on if insurance companies will pay them back for these tests.
The last batch we got was $40,000 on faith that will be paid by the insurance companies, and that's not always being the case.
They come in a cartridge like this.
But there may be more help on the way. Onondaga County just received 4,000 rapid tests from the federal government to help test schools.
When we see activity in a school, we're going to let our asymptomatic saliva testing schedule go on. We are then going to come into the schools with these tests.
Governor Andrew Cuomo also announced they will deploy 400,000 rapid test kits to local health departments, hospitals, and pharmacies where there's an uptick in cases.
Hopefully there will be a seamless process where most doctors' offices, urgent cares, and so on can provide this service.
It's not yet known how many of these tests are being sent to central New York or when they'll get here. It could be more waiting, but that part
Fortunately, we just filled up for the day.
we're already used to. Reporting in Pulaski, I'm Megan Bragg.
NBC3's Megan Bragg investigates how many officers live in the city and tells us if leaders think there needs to be a change.
We are done!
Protests for police reform are pushing for systematic changes across the country. One policy activists are bringing attention to is whether police officers live in the communities they serve.
What most of that is about is being able to know the people who are providing this service.
Syracuse Police Chief Kenton Buckner is no stranger to calls for his officers to live in the city.
I do agree with it, but I've said it privately and publicly. I think police should be able to choose where they want to live, but I also understand the importance of what our community is asking for.
So how many officers actually live in Syracuse? Through a Freedom of Information law request, we got our hands on the zip codes for the home addresses of 409 Syracuse City police officers. At first glance, the mailing city on the list comes up 83 times as Syracuse, 20% of the force. But a closer look at the zip codes cuts that number in half. 40 of those officers live in these 3 neighboring zip codes to Syracuse, which only contain a few streets each that actually fall within city limits. Most officers live in neighboring suburbs. 51 live in Liverpool, 38 in Baldwinsville, and 30 in Camillus. The rest scattered throughout central New York. One officer we found lives in Walworth, an hour and 15 minutes away.
We want to get the best person for the job, regardless of, where they live.
Syracuse Police Union President Jeff Piedmont says in negotiations last year, they came up with a 5-year residency clause for new officers, but Common Council voted it down. Counselors questioned the big cost of the overall contract, not necessarily the 5-year requirement.
The mayor still has an interest in it. We don't have quite as much of an interest in it.
What are the benefits of living where you serve? Some activists argue it will improve community relations and diversify police forces.
I wish there had been more research on this.
In 1980, Professor Peter Eisinger of the New School in New York City studied residency requirements as nearly 2/3 of all cities with more than 250,000 residents had these laws.
To make them resemble the communities policed, the communities they serve. You restricted the pool really to city residents.
Eisinger says back in the 1970s, that was the secondary goal for most of these communities. The number one goal was to generate more tax revenue by keeping employees within city limits, which he says worked. As far as creating a better service for the community, he says there needs to be more research.
I don't know if it creates tighter bonds.
Perception is if you lived in the city, you'll work harder and you'll do a better job for the people, and there's nothing further from the truth.
A big worry for most police departments is recruitment.
Do we think that this will impact us going forward with our recruiting? I think that that's a probability, not a possibility.
The climate that we're in now is definitely more nerve-wracking, and because of the climate, we're having a hard time getting people to sign up to take the police test to start with.
SPD would like to have an incentive program which would allow officers more money to live in the city. However, that would have to be approved by Common Council. Now, we did reach out to all Common Council members. We heard back from Michael Green, Timothy Rudd, and Patrick Hogan. All three said they do think police should live where they work. They're hoping the state legislature would move forward and put residency requirements in place. Live in the studio, I'm Megan Bragg. We appreciate Hi, how are ya? It's the new way millions of Americans are connecting. Instead of looking into someone's eyes, they're looking at computer screens and tiny cameras.
It's hard to change a habit.
Last week, Dr. Anthony Fauci announced that this virus could change the way we say hello forever.
As a society, just forget about shaking hands. We don't need to shake hands. We've got to break that custom.
Handshakes that have been used for peace, deals, and greetings dating back thousands of years.
The handshake began in medieval times when two knights would meet. They would shake hands to show neither of them had a weapon in that hand.
Psychologist Dr. Bob Barish says shaking hands is ingrained in a lot of our brains.
Your brain's been programmed under certain circumstances to shake hands. If you're greeting somebody you're just meeting for the first time.
So the big question is, do you think that we can break this habit of shaking hands?
Well, we can modify it. We won't totally break it. It's too much a part of ourselves and our society.
To try and break that habit, Dr. Barish says to keep your hands in your pockets instead. Now, Dr. Barish also says some people will feel uncomfortable with that change of not shaking hands, while he says others will be glad that you don't have to shake hands anymore. And Matt, we were talking.
Green Empire Farms, the site of Central New York's largest coronavirus outbreak, is also the focus of a you-paid-for-it investigation tonight. Good evening, I'm Matt Mulcahy.
And I'm Megan Coleman. Millions of your tax dollars are invested in keeping this produce company here. But for more than 2 weeks, the company has refused to answer any questions about an outbreak that has infected more than 170 workers, others in the community, and it is possibly being linked to one death. NBC3's Megan Bragg is holding them accountable tonight.
This is Green Empire Farms, sitting on 232 acres of land on the edge of Oneida, a sprawling network of greenhouses touted as the largest ever single build of greenhouses in North America. In these high-tech gardens, about 300 employees tend to tomatoes and other vegetables every day, more than half of them testing positive for coronavirus and living as many as 4 to a room in local hotels for months. Our You Paid For It investigation reveals taxpayers have a more than $15 million stake in this company's success. Operations here at Green Empire Farms started up in August. 10 months later, the nearly $120 million project still lacks housing for its workers that were part of the original plan. And all this development came with a promise of millions of dollars in tax breaks. We uncovered the project benefits agreement dated November 1st, 2018. In it, the Madison County Industrial Development Agency promises more than $10.3 million in tax breaks over the next 15 years. Your tax dollars also went to a $2.6 million state grant and an Excelsior tax credit worth $2.4 million, $15.3 million that you're paying for. In return, Green Empire Farms has promised 200 new full-time jobs, at least 175 construction jobs, and a combined private sector investment of $120 million. Answering questions about health and safety of worker community was not part of that deal.
Thank you for calling Sunset Customer Service.
Every time we try to get a hold of the company, no one calls back. We've also sent them emails and messages through social media. You can even see that someone read the message, but no one has replied. Green Empire Farms is owned by this group, Mastronardi Produce, a 70-year-old produce company headquartered in Canada, owning 6 other greenhouses in the country. In a statement published on the company's website in March, President and CEO Paul Mastronardi said in part, quote, "Ensuring the health and safety of our employees is our top priority." But since then, silence. Congressman Anthony Brindisi represents the very taxpayers who are directly impacted by the deals made between the county and large companies like Green Empire Farms.
The community deserves answers. Our community has seen these reports. We have friends and family that work there in the community, and we want to make sure that people are being treated accordingly. So if there is any wrongdoing by anyone involved, they need to be held accountable.
Our Megan Bragg knows that concern all too well. Tonight, she shares her story and why you should listen even if you have an athlete in a family.
Most of us do it. A simple Google search to figure out what certain symptoms could mean. I found myself doing just that at the beginning of December, a few weeks after testing positive for COVID-19. I typed in chest pain and shortness of breath, and the word that kept popping up, myocarditis.
Myocarditis with COVID is problematic because of the extent that COVID is around.
Cardiologist Dr. Russell Silverman at St. Joseph's Health says myocarditis is far from something uniquely linked to COVID.
Myocarditis is caused by many different viruses, bacteria, all sorts of organisms can cause myocarditis.
It's described as an inflammation of the heart muscle, and it can affect your heart's electrical system and reduce your heart's ability to pump.
And it may limit some people in terms of what they're going to be able to do going forward in their lives.
I went to my doctor and explained the pressure in my chest, feeling it especially after I worked out. She told me 4 of her patients have felt similar symptoms after COVID.
It's a very dangerous illness to have, and it needs to be followed closely. It's not just something that you write off.
That's why Dr. Silverman says they're screening athletes after recovering from COVID before they get back to action. The American College of Cardiology urges doctors to perform heart screenings on anyone who is recovering from the virus and wants to exercise.
COVID does affect the heart, and we do see significant COVID effects at times. It's not a common effect.
Several studies have looked at COVID-19 and how it can affect the heart. In a JAMA cardiology study on 145 athletes that had COVID, 2 of them developed myocarditis. In a similar study from Johns Hopkins and Louisiana State University, out of the 277 autopsied hearts, myocarditis was present in 20 of them. At its most severe, it could cause sudden cardiac arrest. The Myocarditis Foundation says it's responsible for sudden cardiac deaths in 5 to 14% of athletes under 35 years old, contributing to crushing headlines involving high school athletes and college and professional standouts. Dr. Silverman says they're not seeing a huge increase in myocarditis, but because so many people are getting COVID-19, it's expanding the pool of people who could potentially develop it as an after effect.
If you know you had COVID or have COVID and it was symptomatic to you, particularly if you had chest pain, you definitely need to get that checked out, and you should not ignore your chest pain.
Don't ignore chest pain, a strong message from doctors. As for myself, my x-ray and EKG came back normal. I do have an echogram next week. In the studio, I'm Megan Bragg.
How are you feeling today, Meg?
I'm feeling good. You know, like I said in the piece, it's right after I work out, that's when I can really start feeling that chest pain, you know, a few days later too. So something just to check on for
Glad
sure.
you're doing okay. Take it easy though. No more working out for a little while.
Yes.
Thanks so much.